I am recognizing Israel because the Jews are part of the Middle East. Israel is there because it has always been there. It is the same territorial space that King David and the prophets of Judea lived, prospered, thrived, and now they are back. And we are integrating ourselves with the Jewish people in this region to make the Middle East great again. There will never be a Palestinian state, regardless of whatever people say. Especially after October 7th, there will never be a Palestinian state. Yeah, there could be some sort of Emirates, or there could be some sort of um, ways and means to allow the Palestinians to govern themselves, but a state living side by side with Israel in a way that would threaten its security, I don't think it's a priority. Okay, so I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia from an Egyptian father side and a Saudi mother side. So I am half Egyptian, half Saudi, if I would say. And also, I lived most of my life in Saudi Arabia, and then I studied in the U.S. for my last degree, which is a master's degree, and I'm planning to study, inshallah, PhD in Israel. I'm not breaking the news. It's something that is very well known, but I'm just waiting for the right time to come. When this war ends, inshallah, I'm planning to do my PhD in Near East studies in Israel, Be'ezrat Hashem. So that's one. Second, yes, I was raised a very religious Muslim, Mark. A very, very religious Muslim. I memorized the Quran at a young age. I was a fanatic, a radical, if you would say, someone who hated Jews and Israel so much. Not because I was a bad person, but this is what I was indoctrinated with. And it was a country that I loved so much. It's called France. When I worked in Saudi 2009, I remember I joined. I worked in Saudi as a software engineer. The first time I started to work in Saudi was 2005 when I graduated from my university. And I worked as a software engineer for like 10 to 13 years. I was moving from a multinational company to a multinational company. So I always worked in multinational companies. One of the companies that I worked at said that if you, like, for example, one of the companies that I worked at was called Siemens. Siemens is a multinational company. Sure. If you speak German in Siemens, you would have more incentives. So another company that I worked with, or that I worked at, is actually a Saudi French bank. And it said, if you speak French, you would have more incentives. So they would send you to learn French if you want to learn French. And it's like a scholarship or like an exchange program. Mm-hmm. So 2010, I was sent to Paris to study French. And I did something called a homestay program, and I lived with a Jewish family, and the rest is history. And then my eyes were opened from that time, and lots of things changed. I do believe that I confronted my old bad ideas with reality about Jews, about Israel, about Judaism at its core, because we were taught about Judaism in school, but from the adversaries of Judaism. So they would tell you all the bad things about the Jews. They would never tell you any positive thing about 15 million people who are bringing blessing to this world. Or they never told us about a state of a size of New Jersey that brought to the world Waze, cherry tomatoes, Phillycam, USB, ICQ, and many innovations that really blessed humanity. They wouldn't tell you that. Now, things are changing in Saudi. Not so much, but they are changing, of course, to the best. But in the UAE, the problem has been solved from 2001, because when 2001 happened, you know what happened. September 11, mm-hmm. Two of the perpetrators were from the Emirates, 15 from Saudi, one from Egypt, one from Lebanon. And because of those two Emiratis, Sheikh Mohammed decided to rehabilitate education, top, bottom. And the result was phenomenal and fascinating. No hate, more open to tolerance. 10 years ago, there was no Ministry of Tolerance in the UAE, and now you have it. So this is why I'm telling you I'm very optimistic, because things will move forward to other countries that's been through the same cycle of hate, like Syria.
So the one thing I've been curious about for a while, because I've not heard you talk about this. It's one thing to spend time getting to know a Jewish family, enjoying Shabbat, enjoying some of the other things. It's quite another to then become a Zionist activist. Now, if I were advising you back then, I would say that's probably not the wisest career move. And I would imagine other people said, don't do it. So what was the catalyst? I mean, most people would have said, had a nice time, I'm going to quietly go on, like Jews, befriend them. But you decided to take on a very public role at perhaps significant cost, potential cost to you. So how'd that happen?
First of all, I want to tell you one thing. I will tell you how it happened. But first of all, I have to say it out loud that I have zero regrets of everything that I did. I'm not a Zionist activist, you would say. I'm a proud Zionist activist. You have to add the word proud because
Right.
you just dropped it. So back to the question, how that
We're going to have to
happened.
change your Wikipedia page because I actually saw that on your Wikipedia page, how you described the Zionist activist. I'll change it to proud Zionist activist.
Proud Zion. We need to speak to. I need to speak to the Wikipedia team because lots of things I need to change in my website. Anyway,
Yeah.
so as I told you, I was raised a religious person, and I am still a religious Muslim, but I just made some fixes in my faith. I would say some fixes, some hot fixes. Speaking to a technical software engineering term, so. As I told you, because I was religious, I really loved the faith, the side of faith that Judaism really had. I felt that it's so connected to Islam. I feel that both of them can reconcile if you have the right people who are educated and who know enough about Judaism and about Zionism as well. Now, the word Zionist or Zionism is a bit of a toxic word in the Arab world and globally, by the way. While it can be defined in two lines, Zionism can be defined in two lines or in a one long line, Mark, which is the right of the Jewish people of self-determination in their ancestral homeland. If you are a religious Muslim or a religious Abrahamic faith follower, you would realize that the first Abrahamic faith was actually, I would call it correctly, the Israelite faith that was later called Judaism or Rabbinic Judaism after the temple. But I would call it the Israelite faith. And it's so a preposterous, Mark, that 1.8 billion Muslims and 2.1 billion Christians, they have this culture of theirs intertwined with the Jewish faith without even making the connections. And I always say that we as Muslims, many of us name their children after Jewish prophets, kings, and heroes, and then they question Zionism. So that should stop right there. If you really name your children after Jewish prophets, kings, and heroes, then you have to know one important thing about Judaism. You cannot disconnect the land from the faith. You cannot disconnect the land from that faith. If you agree on that, then the rest is so simple to explain. So the prophets that we are named after were far more Zionists than any member of the Likud party. And I don't want to get into politics. But the prophets that we are named after, like David, Eonas, or Yunus, or Isa, who is Jesus, they were all Zionists. They all believed in the Jewish sovereignty over the land of Israel. I always say to my Christian friends, Mark, that Jesus was a Zionist himself because in the Gospel of John, it says that he celebrated Hanukkah. It said literally that Jesus ascended to Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of dedication. Ask any educated person who knows much about Christianity or Judaism or any biblical history, what is the festival of dedication? The festival of dedication, the word Hanukkah itself, or Hanukkah, it is dedication. And it was in winter times. And the festival of dedication, what was it about? It was about a battle between Judah the Maccabees and the Hasmonean family against the Seleucids, the Greek Levant family that succeeded Alexander in Levant. And Judah were fighting against the Seleucids to have sovereignty over Judea. So it is the most Zionist festival that anyone would celebrate. Jesus celebrated it, and other prophets as well. So this is the thing that many people need to understand. Education is so important in bridging the gap between Zionism and Islam, because I don't feel or I don't see any contradiction about that. When I decided to go public in 2017, I knew, Mark, that there was a price to pay. I knew it from day one. But I was sincere, because even when I was a radical, I'll be very honest, even when I was a radical, I was sincere to my ideas. I was sincere because I believed that this is the right thing to do. So when you have a faith that you choose, or an ideology that you choose, not an ideology that you were indoctrinated with, you become so faithful in wanting to fight for it. I'm so proud that I chose this path, zero regrets, and I'm so happy that it's now a life mission, and I will keep doing this until I die.
Well, ditto to that. We're appreciative as well of all the hard work that you do. It's a great segue into my next question, which is you term it Judeo-Arab relations. And it reminds me of a terrific conversation I heard between Ed Hussein and your colleague, Amjad Taja. And Ed calls it the Abrahamic civilization. I don't know if it's a little different. I think it probably is a little different than Judeo-Arab relations, but the idea is we really do need to understand the interconnectedness. I mean, if we all are Abrahamic, there's significant overlap between and relationships between the three religions. So I'd love to get your take on the Abrahamic civilization part and kind of get your thoughts on how we as three Abrahamic religions and peoples should work together to advance this idea.
I'll start with your latter part by focusing on the common grounds, the commonalities that we have. And trust me, Mark, the commonalities that we have are far more important, and even are bigger than the differences. And we have a lot in common, and we can always focus on the future, focus on building a prosperous relationship between the three faiths, reconciling, annexing, or how to say this, stepping away from the extremists from all faiths, because there are extremist Jews, there are extremist Christians, and there are extremist Muslims as well. So we have to axe the extremists, get them out of the way. And also we have to realize that our region, the Middle East, is the best region in the world. I love my region so much, and I believe it can surpass Europe, it can surpass America. We can live in an era where you find Americans like yourself or many other people from different parts of the world would say, I want to go and live in the Middle East because this region is a blessed region, as it should, not as a region filled with wars, chaos, and mayhem. So this is what I believe we should do. And the second part of your question, I don't really find it a disagreement between calling Judeo-Arabic or the Abrahamic civilizations. I would say that both names lead to the same direction, and I'm fine with that. Judeo-Arabic, maybe it focuses more on Judaism and Islam, because I believe we don't have much of a problem with Christianity in the Middle East. Yeah, of course, there is. The Christians have some problems in the Middle East, but the focus, the core focus is on Jewish-Muslim relations. And if we fix that, everything else is fixed, in my opinion, of course.
There are two books I remember reading. One was called The Shadow of the Sword by Tom Holland, which talks about,
Wow.
Looks like you've read it.
Wow.
Beautiful, brilliant book. And it really does explore the beginnings of rabbinical Judaism, Christianity, and then the beginnings of Islam. And you see, and the other one is called The Islamic Jesus by Mustafa Akil. which also was similar in context, but it does talk about how amorphous so many of these ideas were at their beginnings and how interrelated all these religions were at some stage. So we are far closer, I think, than people give us credit for, though they've diverged quite a bit in certain periods of time. Now, as you said, you've been talking quite publicly about this since 2017, and I feel pretty confident that things are not necessarily better now than they were in 2017, given what we're seeing, what you see up close, college campuses in certain cities across this country and across Europe. I'd love to get your sense, what your assessment is as a non-Jew, a non-Israeli, an Emirati. What is improving that we don't necessarily see, and what's getting worse?
So I would say it seems that the problem with anti-Semitism is not always related to Israel. It's related to having something against the Jews. And I always say, Mark, with all due respect to everyone who would disagree with that, the only fault, or one of the fault of the Jews is that they are the most successful minority in the world. That is something out of their hands, I know, but sometimes they pay the price for it. And it seems that as many people say, Israel is the only country that is not allowed to win because their enemies know very well how they can defeat it with propaganda by maximizing the number of casualties or deaths that would put Israel on pressure, because Israel values life. Israel values the life of its citizens. Look at what is happening right now with the negotiations, Mark. The Israeli government is negotiating 10 Israeli hostages for 1,500 Palestinian prisoners. That tells a lot. Gilad Shalit in 2011 was released for 1,200 Palestinian prisoners. It tells a lot about who values life and who values or who worships death. So yes, I know it's cloudy. I know it is hazy. I know that things are not as good as we wanted, but they are heading into a different direction. I'll tell you why. Because in the Middle East, like the UAE and Saudi as well, and other countries, we are a top-down countries. What do I mean by top-down? So most of us are monarchies, and when the decision comes from top, it follows the bottom. So if the leadership of Saudi Arabia says that we will normalize relations with Israel, or if the one in Oman says that, or the one in Kuwait or in other countries, things will be better in the sense of moving things forward. They will not move as fast because, of course, there was a war, but we have to ask ourselves this question: do we want Hamas to win? If we say that peace will be hurdled or will stop, that means that Hamas and the bad guys win. But if the Abraham Accords expand, and they will, inshallah, that means that the bad guys are losing and the good guys are winning. So I see things moving slowly but surely, but hopefully, and I would say not only hopefully and surely, they are heading towards a better future. And the announcement for the expansion of the Abraham Accords, I can say it. Is imminent.
So I'm going to get back to the top-down approach in just a moment, because I think it's an interesting way to look at it. And it does present an issue for democracies, which are very different, obviously, than monarchies. So I'm going to ask you about that in just a minute. But the one thing I want to ask, because you speak on so many college campuses, you are there talking to the uneducated as well as the educated. What surprises you most when you are talking to those on college campuses that hold these beliefs that seem almost incomprehensible for an educated individual?
The American Gen Zs who don't have an idea who they're defending. The American Gen Zs who think that Hamas are freedom fighters. They haven't read the Hamas charter. They don't know the death cult that Hamas is part of. They don't know that they are next to those. And I met some of them in University of Rhode Island in Providence. Wallahi, I felt so sorry for them. I felt so sorry because I feel that they are maybe they are not maybe, I would say surely they are good people with good intentions, but they don't really understand, they don't fathom the danger of supporting such terrorist groups like Hamas. And they speak to me like, oh, they are freedom fighters, they are fighting for their independence. Who told you that Hamas believes in a nation state? Who told you that Hamas believes in a nation state? Who told you that Hamas believes in living side by side with Jews? No, it's not about Jews, it's about Zionists. Habibi, you haven't heard their charter. They believe that the final hour will not come until Muslims, according to their interpretation, until Muslims fight Jews and kill them. Jews, not Zionists, Jews. And with this lack of education, that really staggered me, Mark, honestly. University of Rhode Island was, and of course I went to Columbia as well, but University of Rhode Island, Providence, I will never forget the faces of the white American Gen Zs who had no idea about the organization that they are defending, thinking that they are doing good, while if they would live in Gaza, they would not survive a day.
And you spent time in Europe as well, not
Yes.
too long ago you lived. So what is the similarities or dissimilarities between what we're seeing in the United States and what we're seeing in Europe?
In Europe, mostly are immigrants from the Middle East, mostly are North African immigrants who dominated the scene, unfortunately, because of the absence of moderate Muslim voices. And the moderate Muslim voices that I spoke with in Italy, they were so afraid to speak up because they don't want to be intimidated. I understand that, but if you keep saying that we are afraid to speak up, we are afraid to speak up, then who's going to speak up? You're going to leave the arena, or you're going to leave the field to those who would speak on your behalf, and then you complain in or behind closed doors saying that, well, they don't represent us. Well, they do. If you don't speak up against what they say, then they do. That's an Arabic saying that says that if you don't show an opposition, that you are in a way in agreement.
Interesting. All right, before I get to my next question, I do want to remind everybody, feel free to submit questions. We'll hold them in the queue and we'll ask in a little while. So let's get to this sort of top-down approach. But first I want to sort of segue in by asking you, the UAE has taken a very hard line against Islamists, and Saudi Arabia too has done a remarkable job sort of cleaning house, from what I understand, with Islamists within the territory. Yet the West seems to ignore your lead. Muslim Brotherhood is outlawed in many Middle Eastern countries, seems to be embraced despite ample evidence, particularly recently, a French intelligence report that put out the extent of the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe. You travel seamlessly in both worlds. Why do you think the West has such a hard time grappling with what Saudi Arabia and UAE so clearly understand?
Canadian once told me we would die rather than being called racists.
I knew you were going there.
Yes, we would accept death than accept being called racists, and we don't want to say comments that would make us look like Islamophobes. And of course, the word Islamophobia itself is ludicrous. It's hoax. There is anti-Muslim bigotry, but there is nothing called Islamophobia. Islamophobia is a word created by the Islamists to protect themselves from being criticized. So when it comes from Arab and Muslim voices, it makes a difference. And this is what I told many politicians that I met in France and in Italy as well. But they are too afraid, Mark, because they say, you can say that, but if we say this, we would be labeled as racists and Islamophobes, and we will never tolerate ourselves being called that. So we need to have more work. And I am optimistic as well, because in France, just like you highlighted, Ministry of Interior released a very interesting report. I read the report. The only thing I didn't like about the report was the idea that in order to satisfy the anger of the Muslim communities in France, we have to recognize a Palestinian state, which is not going to happen. Let's be very honest, okay? I want to say one thing: there will never be a Palestinian state, regardless of whatever people say. Especially after October 7, there will never be a Palestinian state. Yeah, there could be some sort of emirates, or there could be some sort of um, uh, ways and means to allow the Palestinians to govern themselves, but a state living side by side with Israel in a way that would threaten its security, I don't think it's a priority. The priority we have to be very courageous in saying that the priority should be in having a Palestinian leadership that would openly say the following: yes to recognizing the Jewish state, the one and the only Jewish state, the one and the only Jewish state that is being called an empire by some American media persons. One media person in America said, Israel is expanding like an empire. Trust me, it is the only empire in the world that you have to punch zoom 10 times to fit the title of the country on its map. You see how big empire that is? It's crazy. So you have to, that was the only thing that was written in that report that I didn't like. But other than that, France is waking up, other countries as well. They have the sense that there is a difference between a spiritual Muslim and a radical Muslim. You might ask me, Mark, give me 1, 2, 3 differences. I would give you more than that, but I would give you one important difference. A religious Muslim, a spiritual Muslim, when the call of prayer goes on, you know where he would pray? He would pray in a mosque or at his place. A radical Islamist would shut the roads down and would pray in the middle of the road to stop traffic. Why? Because it's not a prayer. It's a show of dominance. It's a show of power. That's what the West doesn't understand, unfortunately. And of course, don't forget Marx. It's because of democracies. I don't like democracies. I'll be very honest. I'm a tyrant. I know that. I'm a rat. I'm a not a tyrant. What I would say. I'm a dictator. If you would say a dictator.
Well, you benefit from the greatest governance system of all. It's a benevolent dictatorship. I think everybody would love to live under a benevolent dictatorship.
It's a dictatorship that gives everyone
but they're fleeting
rights.
And kind of hard to maintain.
It's a dictatorship that gives us free healthcare, free education, that gives us housing, that gives us amazing jobs, that Baruch Hashem gives us, thank God, lots of benefits, and we like it. But democracy has liberal freedom that is being misused by those radicals in your countries, unfortunately, Mark.
Well, just so everybody knows, because we're talking about the faithful, the devout Muslims who are faithful and not Islamists, Elnet has a delegation of influential imams.
I loved it.
From throughout Europe on the grounds. And it's pretty remarkable. They're putting their lives at risk for putting themselves out there so much. But it really is, I think, that it is essential.
You know I'm sorry, Mark. You know what's the most fascinating about this delegation? The 2 or 3 of them were actually radicals. Like Noor. Noor was a radical, a former radical, and he became a very peaceful person. And he became a very peaceful person, and now he's advocating for peace in the region. So this is what really gives me lots of hope.
And there are more and more stories of those who had previously been radical, who have been, let's say, reformed, for lack of a better word. And it does bode well for what you're doing, which is educating, trying to help them understand the facts, help them understand the purpose, and bringing light into the world, as we say. So let's stick with the challenges of Western democracies, because again, it's easy for a benevolent dictatorship to say, this is what we think is right. Everybody needs to ascribe to it, and this is how we're going to move forward together in the future. Democracies are very, very messy. And I know you're not a political scientist, but I'm sure you've given thought to policies that Western democracies can consider that perhaps would work in a liberal democracy, that would help us sustain our rights without necessarily infringing on on others in a way that would undermine, democracy.
One of the most important things that needs to happen, Mark, in my opinion, is the differentiation between um, uh, freedom of speech and freedom of incitement. And there are some slurs or there are some chants that need to be criminalized because they carry within the sense of violence. And this is what the West needs to. And I spoke with some Canadian Parliament members in Quebec about that, and they said, "Yeah, that's a good start. That because we don't want to censor everything, and we don't want to." But I said, "Yeah, but like for example, from the river to the sea, or Khaybar Khaybar Yahud, these are not peaceful chants. They carry lots of violent meanings within, and their purpose is to incite."
So the first question is from Sharon. I don't have Sharon's last name, but she says, what has been the most difficult part of being a proud Zionist activist? Do you get threats? And how often do you have to deal with that?
Yeah, I get lots of threats, but I'll be very honest with you, Mark. I don't get threats in the UAE. I feel so safe in the UAE, thank God. The most difficult part, honestly, is that every time I go to Saudi Arabia to visit my family or to Egypt to visit my other family, most of my family are in Saudi. I have a family in the UAE, of course, but I have my mom, my nephews in Saudi, and I have my father's family. Some of them are in Egypt. I cannot go, and I know very well that I would be interrogated. In Saudi, I haven't been interrogated yet, hopefully, but I know for example, I do remember when I went to Egypt one day, I was asked by the officer, "Why do you speak Hebrew? What is your interest in Israel? What is this? What is that?" Nothing humiliating. I'll be very honest with you, but it was just like. Uh, Egypt has signed a peace agreement with Israel, which is mind blowing. So why do you have this kind of problem? The media is the real challenge. The media wants to silence voices like us. But I'm telling you, I'm very optimistic because once the Abraham Accords expand and the normalization takes a better picture, all of these sanctions will be lifted. I do understand that some sort of people that media persons they think that Zionism is not okay, Zionism is racism, and they don't know anything about Israel, they don't know anything about Zionism, and they don't know anything about the reality on the ground. They haven't been to Israel, they haven't visited. But these are the challenges that I face. But I'm telling you, Mark, I've been on the other side of the river, and I looked back to it and I said, thank you, I'm not coming back. Because I know how it looks. I know it has a great hate that it would indoctrinate in everyone's chest. And I will never allow hate to come to my heart. I always say, just as people say, you love Israelis so much, I said, I do love Israelis so much, but I love the Palestinians as much. I have nothing against the Palestinian people. Not even Israel has a problem with the Palestinian people. Israel has a problem with Hamas. I have a problem with Hamas. I have a problem with the radical extremists who don't really believe in the values of prosperity, security, and peace for all, but not against the Palestinian people or any other people. So these are the challenges, but they are worth fighting for, Mark. That's the good thing, and thank God he gives me the strength to keep fighting for that. If I wasn't a former radical, or if I wasn't a former extremist when I was a teenager, maybe I wouldn't have this kind of strength. But because I know where that hate comes from, and I've been there and I defeated it with knowledge, facts, and the truth. This gives me the perseverance.
Mhm. And I think your ranks are expanding. And I don't know if it's just that it happens to be my Twitter feed, but just recently, a couple of people have popped in. One is a young UAE political analyst I wasn't sure his name because his handle didn't have his whole name, but I'm going to read you something he wrote. Quote, Israel, long miscast as an outsider, is increasingly viewed as a strategic partner capable of transforming regional futures. Its contributions in defense, water security, agriculture, and innovation make it a necessary pillar in any serious long-term plan for prosperity. He goes on to say, in the future, there is no place for hostage takers or ideological saboteurs, only for partners who value life, growth, and stability. And there's another one, Eamon Dean. I don't know if you know him. He's in the UK, also from the UAE, who is out there prominently taking on this cause. You know, when I said in the introduction that this tiny country of 1.2 million Emiratis is leading this fight, it really is the Emiratis who are the
So
Pied
this is what I'm
Pipers here.
telling you. In the UAE, it is the perfect place. And also, I have no threats here, thank God. But I'm just telling you, don't forget that I have a big family in Saudi, and I have also a family in Egypt. And this is the problem that I'm personally facing, especially in Saudi. Every time I go to Saudi, I have to make some important calls with people high up just to make sure that I will not be stopped at the airport. I'll be very honest with you. I will be very honest. Thank God it didn't happen, but you know, you never know what's going to happen.
So Elia Elishmerny wants to know if there are any plans for a book. You seem to have a hell of a
Yes,
story. So
yes. And I'm planning to publish some exclusives in that book. Like for example, the certificate that I have from Saudi Arabia in 1999 from a religious school that I memorized the full Quran. That is something I never published, and I will publish my certificates from the school in France in 2010. The name of the school is Accord School, where I studied French, and also I will publish some exclusive content for the book, and the book will be focused on my journey. And yeah, inshallah, and I'm gonna do some book tours when it's out next year, by next year, inshallah. Inshallah. Yes, and I have so many exclusive contents that I haven't, so much exclusive content and so many exclusive materials that I haven't published on my social media yet that will be in the book, inshallah. Inshallah.
all right, well, I'm sure everybody on this briefing will go out and buy a copy. So you have pre-orders already.
No,
So you just have to put it out there on Amazon.
you have to attend the book tour. That's the most important thing.
We'll do that. We'll do pre-orders first, and then we'll join you on the book tour. So if I can help, just let me know. We've got a question for Yael Manor Oshinsky, and she delves into a topic I wanted to get your thoughts on, which is about Iran. So I'm going to dovetail. My initial question is, you know, as an Emirati, what are your thoughts on Iran's weakened position right now? And what Yael would like to know is, and she hears from her Jewish Persian friends still living there, and we've heard reports that the regime is going after people who they consider accomplices of Israel, Jews and others. You know, is there any role that the UAE can play?
The UAE is playing a very positive role in de-escalation. But I want to tell you one thing, Mark. Personally speaking, I am very disappointed at Iran for a simple reason. The radical Islamist regime turned Iran from a country that is, you know, the Persians and the Jews. I made a video like 2 days ago. I said the Persians and the Jews are two ancient peoples that were destined to live together in peace. Can you believe that the first person who freed the Jews was a Persian,
Mhm.
Cyrus? Cyrus the Great. He was called by Isaiah the Messiah, a Messiah, not a Messiah, a person who is anointed for a very holy mission to free the Jews, not only to free the Jews, to free all of those who were um, kept captives in Persia and send them back home. But Cyrus sent the Jews back to Judea, where they come from, with a blessing to build or rebuild the temple. So the Islamic regime turned this beautiful country into something that is so radical, I believe the only way to defeat Iran is by having more peace accords. That is my approach. When you have more peace accords, you would corner those who don't believe in peace. I don't call for a regime change, but I hope that maybe some sort of um, reconciliation or rehabilitation, but I think it's far-fetched with this regime. But I think that if you corner this regime with more peace accords in the Middle East, like Syria and Lebanon, trust me, the announcement is imminent. When Syria and Lebanon Syria and Lebanon join the Abraham Accords, things will change. The dynamics of the Middle East will change.
So I'd love to get your thoughts on the conundrum known as Ahmed al-Sharaa. Can you explain how someone what is his story? Is he to be believed? He was HTS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, and now...
I said it, Mark. I would trust him if he comes publicly and say, the ideas that I had about jihad, the ideas that I had about hate against Jews and against Christians, and the bad ideas that I had, I expunged them with conviction, and I'm opening a new page. If he doesn't say this publicly, I wouldn't trust him.
Okay.
It is okay for people to change, but you have to publicly renounce and denounce your bad ideas, or else you will not be credible.
Fair enough. We will keep our eyes and ears open for that, because
and
at this time, that's not happening.
Mark, I'm sorry, Mark. There's nothing wrong with renouncing or denouncing bad ideas publicly.
Changing your mind is a good thing. It's okay to change your mind.
But you have to say it.
Yeah.
You have to say it, and you have to prove it also with action.
He's
saying the right things. He's saying the right things, but he's not. I know rabbis who met with him. I know a rabbi, a very famous rabbi, Rabbi Cooper. He's a good friend of mine, Abraham Cooper, and also an evangelist who met with him. They said very positive things, but to my personal opinion, unless he comes kosher publicly, denounces the old bad ideas, I would still remain skeptical. That's me speaking.
We should trust but verify, as the saying goes. We perhaps should give him a little bit more time. He is surrounded by his former HTS allies.
Is he trying to make peace with Israel as a truce so that he can get stronger and then attack Israel later? Or is he announcing that he is recognizing Israel? I would love to hear that from him. I am recognizing Israel because the Jews are part of the Middle East. Israel is there because it has always been there. It is the same territorial space that King David and the prophets of Judea lived, prospered, thrived, and now they are back, and we are integrating ourselves with the Jewish people in this region to make the Middle East great again. If he says that, that's great.
Well, I haven't looked at the participant list today, but I'll guess that there are members of parliament who often join our calls, and I think this would be wise for them to understand and perhaps take seriously that if we're going to allow Syria into the table, welcome them to the table of nations, there needs to be a renouncing of these.
Israel has a great work to do with its Arab neighbors, and unfortunately, Mark, if you allow me to say this publicly, the greatest challenge that Israel has is proving its legitimacy. And I'll be very honest with you, okay? I'll be very quite blunt and honest. If you have a government in Israel that is not Zionist enough in proving why Israel is there, because it has always been there, this mission will keep getting more difficult. I always say to my Jewish friends, it is for Moshe Dayan, who was a great military leader, it was for him to blame the status of the Temple Mount, because he gave it as a gesture to those who took it for granted. He said, we don't want it. We don't want a Vatican. We don't want this. We don't want that. The current government, in my opinion, is the one who can make peace with most of its neighbors. And I believe I believe that I don't want to get into politics, but I believe that Israel has a prime minister who believes in peace through strength and who is so proud of his identity as a Jew, as an Israeli, as a Zionist, as someone who is the heir of the real Jewish people who lived in this region. I feel so connected when Bibi speaks about the connection with the land of Israel, the Jews with the land of Israel in many podiums. And I always say, this is the prime minister that Israel wants. And any prime minister who would succeed Bibi, he has to speak the same language, not the language of, don't get religion in the topic, don't get this. And we are very religious people in the Middle East. You have to speak the language of the Middle East. You have to prove to them that this is the land of our ancestors, and we are here because we have always been here. And the word Jew itself defies those who call us non-indigenous. The word Jew comes from Judea. This is our homeland. We are, and I'm not a Jew saying that, but why I'm saying that, because I'm not a Jew, because many of my cousins are named Dawood, which is the Arabic version of David, and then they send me WhatsApp messages. What's wrong with you, Zionists? Habibi, you are named after a Zionist king. You don't know enough about who's you're named after. Education matters, man.
Education does matter, and a voice like yours matters too. I'm going to close with one question, but if you can look to the future, what are a couple of the things, sort of tangible things, that you're most optimistic about for the future of the region, the future of the Abrahamic civilization?
That there will be a conference discussing the threats of competition in the Middle East. Who would be the main player in AI, Israel, UAE, or Saudi Arabia?
It's quite a competition. It's quite a conference.
It's a great conference, and it's a great competition. It's a very useful. It's a very how to say this? It's a very amazing competition, and this is what we should be concerned about. And I hope that, inshallah, one day we will have someone who would govern Gaza and say, I will take all the Israelis, I will make all the Israelis leave Tel Aviv voluntarily to spend their summer in the beaches of Gaza.
From your mouth to God's ear. It's been I could talk to you for another half hour. I'm sure everybody would probably stay on the line if we did that, but I'm going to call an end to our Monday briefing. This has been terrific. It's been great spending time with you. I'm sure everybody enjoyed it. Want to wish you well. Want to wish everybody on the call well, and say thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Loay,
thank you so much,
all the
Mark.
best.
God bless you.
Great seeing
God bless
you.
you all.
You too.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Be safe.